No. Okay, stop.
No,
Okay,
today
this is high science.
this is high science.
How are we entering this video?
We are talking about life today. Everything about it, like what it is, how to define what it is, talk about if death is fundamentally different from life, and is life important? Is it sacred? And is it even a question for science to answer? Stuff like that. Okay. So everyone kind of has an idea of the difference between living thing and a non-living thing, right? Everyone kind of understands, like, we're all kind of chilling here doing stuff, talking, we're kind of alive, and, like, that chair is very much not alive, right?
I think so.
Yeah, I think so. Right, yeah. So what do you think makes something alive? What qualities make something living? How can you go outside and tell a living thing from a non-living thing? Think about it. Like, how do you do it? You know cars don't live, right?
It can move on its own.
But
But what about trees, though?
Shit.
Trees are living,
No, I know
That's the point.
Trees
They're
do
living.
move on their own because they grow.
yeah, but
but they move. They just don't move a lot.
Organs.
no, I was gonna say pulse and consciousness.
Well, okay, if consciousness, that's a whole other topic. But how is consciousness like a thing that's on or off? Like, do we have it and everything else doesn't? Or is it like a spectrum, you know? Like, do things have more consciousness than other things? On a continuum. And if that's the case, like, do trees have consciousness? So we don't really have any way to know that. At least right now.
I don't know. There was some stuff written about how they maybe communicate,
Mhm.
which I think is super cool.
How would you explain it to a 5-year-old that looked at you and looked at a fire and said, like, that? Why isn't that thing alive? Like, how would you explain a fire isn't alive compared to?
Well, if we use Brady's story grammar elements, we say a character has eyes and a face.
Okay.
And
What about trees?
well, if you put eyes and a face on them in a
Ooh,
storybook, then they're
uh-huh.
alive and a character. And if you don't, then they're not. a
That's
character.
interesting. Maybe that's how we started learning the difference between it, like in storybooks had faces or not.
That's
That's
why the
how we
Great
teach
Deku
it.
Tree has a face. He's not just a tree.
Compared to those other shitty trees.
Yeah,
Faces.
there are just shitty trees in fucking Hyrule.
Right. But those trees are alive, no?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
All right.
well, until I...
So go ahead. What else? How would you explain life to a 5-year-old? How would you explain that fire is non-living? It's hard, right? Life, like the definition for life is fuzzy. The way biologists handle this question, they don't really. They put guidelines in place that aren't like 1,000,000% concrete, but it's the best scientific way we have to break down the difference between living things and non-living things. And there are 7 characteristics that determine whether something's living or not living, right? And the first one is organization. If something is organized, right? Rocks tend to be unorganized, right? Cars are pretty organized. So like this one trait doesn't determine whether something's living or not living. Right?
I'm
When
not
you-
very organized.
I'm not very organized either. I feel
When you say organized, cars are organized, you mean in the way they're
Like-
built? Because
Right,
I'm pretty sure
exactly.
they don't hold Congress.
You're right. Last I checked. No, you're right. And that's why you have to hit all of these traits.
But, so specifically,
Mm-hmm.
cars are... oh my god, I forgot the word already.
Complex?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Cars are complex, but only because we built them to be that way, because we are complex.
Right. Okay. I feel you.
And
Right.
also they
So
wouldn't work easy.
okay, but then how? Okay, so it's like something else built them is what you mean.
A living thing built
Right.
them.
A living thing built them. Okay. Were you built by your parents? Would you say?
Yeah, well, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Mhm.
I don't know if I'd use built, but yes. Created,
Yeah, right.
squirted out.
Okay.
Well, I guess cut out of.
One of the other traits is being able to reproduce. Come from, but I guess it has to be your own being reproducing.
Yeah, it's going to reproduce because they make something else,
Right.
but they don't make another car.
Right. Cars don't reproduce, but living things reproduce. Like species are trying to propagate and get more of themselves, right?
Yeah.
They could metabolize, like go through. They can actually conduct chemical reactions in order to live. Go through like respiration and all that fun stuff.
But a fire is a chemical reaction.
Yeah, exactly right. That's why all the traits have to be hit for this. And again, it's not like a perfect list. It has to be able to grow. You plant a tree and it grows. We grow from little baby versions of us. It has to respond to stimulus. Like if I jab you in the side, and you like go away from that a little bit.
Do trees?
Trees respond to stimulus. Like there are some plants that will. They'll think about it. Like trees, they in the wintertime they like go dormant or whatever, and then in the springtime they come back to life. They're responding to the stimulus of the change in the temperature. You know what I mean? They can evolve, which is a whole thing. It's a whole thing.
What's evolution, John?
That's a whole topic.
Tell me about evolution, John.
Man.
No.
Evolution.
No, wait, stop.
Save that
That's-
for another video.
do a
Yeah,
whole
but
other
that's
thing.
so important for life, though. Evolution. You know.
Next episode, evolution.
Evolution.
Come back, subscribe,
Come
like,
back.
comment. Send me dick pics.
Yeah.
No.
What's your email?
They don't know my
No.
number.
What's your email?
They don't have my email.
Dickpics@highscience.com.
That's it. When we get sponsors, it'll be like, go to Nature Box at Dick Pics, like promotion
Can we make that
code
our
Dick
domain
Pics.
name? Domain name?
DIXPIX.
Dickpics. All right. Anyway, we also try to maintain. This is going to be a really fancy sounding word. Homeostasis, which means just keeping yourself within like a temperature range and like an acidity range and everything that kind of keeps us at a
Equilibrium.
equilibrium. That's the great word. Equilibrium keeps us at equilibrium, right? Okay.
Yeah.
So that was a lot of things I said just now, right? There's a lot of like traits.
It's a lot of words.
There's a lot of words.
There's a lot of words.
So, how would you now explain to the 4-year-old that the fire's not alive?
I would tell him that homeostasis. Yo, kid,
Yo,
homeostasis.
homeostasis.
Equilibrium. I learned words today.
Need some words, right?
No.
A physicist I really like. His name is Richard Feynman. He came up with a way to learn things the most efficient way possible. And I guess I'm kind of going off topic, but this is kind of cool. He said that in order to learn things, you have to be able to explain that thing like you were talking to a kid. You know, trying to explain that thing in the simplest way possible. And getting rid of the jargon. Like he said that it's better to. There's a difference between knowing the name of something and knowing that thing. Like I could sit here and say homeostasis, and that sounds fancy and awesome and everything.
But if you can't explain what it is,
Exactly.
it's
If you
meaningless.
can't explain it simply, then you don't have it. And I found like teaching things and talking about things. Had to get that out, dude. It was sitting there for a while. Talking about things is the best way to learn it yourself, because you have to come at it from a different angle if you're not getting it, you know? And you have to kind of process it in order to talk about it again. Homeostasis, like that's a fancy word, but like it just means like keeping ourselves in equilibrium, which is another fancy word, which just means like we're trying to be at a range that we could handle, you know? That we could control our temperature, we control all that stuff, you know? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, homeostasis for the fire, right? You can't homeostasis.
No, but I was thinking about the fire.
Mhm.
So the fire can grow.
Yeah, right.
The fire reacts to stimulus.
Yeah,
How is the fire not alive?
right.
And it also, I don't know
doesn't
about reproduce, but it can. I guess I would
Can
say grow, but
reproduce, right? See, that's the thing. Like when you have to, with science, you have to come up with the best way to describe that thing and what's going on. And we know life is happening, right? We know life is going on. Like, we can all agree that there is life happening, but being able to describe it is so important, you know? Does that make sense? Being able to talk about the experience makes it in like a very particular, specific way, helps you understand that thing a little more, you know? So yeah, like if we're trying to make this definition and explaining science isn't alive, it hits a lot of the traits, right? But I don't think it doesn't go through. It doesn't have like a metabolism. I guess it does with a chemical reaction, right? Maybe
Is fire alive, John?
I
I
think
think
we figured out fire's
alive
right
New hot take on fire. It's alive. Discovered fire.
Man.
Episode 2.
Groundbreaking. Right.
I'm gonna start
But
naming
that's the
all
thing,
the
it
house
gets like
fires.
fuzzy, right? The whole definition gets fuzzy, is the whole idea when you try to define it. Okay. As far as we know, all living things are made of cells. Okay? As far as we understand. Fire isn't made of cells. It's not. So,
It's very unfortunate.
too bad.
You can never be
fire.
people, fire.
Oh. See, people are racist against other people. They should be racist against
You're
fire.
right,
They don't even
dude.
have fucking cells.
No, no cells. That's like a whole other That's a whole other topic, man. Prejudice against fires.
Science.
All right. Anyway, so, okay. This is what happened in the past. There was this guy named Robert Hooke, and he invented the microscope, as far as I know. I'm pretty sure he did. I'm pretty sure he did.
Cool.
But Robert Hooke invented the microscope, or at least he was using lenses in a particular way to make small things like really big. That was a big deal for us, right? Because science is all about observing, like we're seeing, we're touching, we're feeling, using measurements. Now we can measure things at a scale that we were never able to see before, you know? We were able to look at things more closely than ever. So we looked at living things. We looked at pieces of animal. You know, we looked at pieces of plant. Like, we're looking at this shit, trying to figure this shit out. Like, what's going on really small. And separate people found out that plants and animals, when you get super close, are made up of these little room-looking things. And the name was coined cell because it looked like a room. You know, it looked like a cell, right? And that's what these things are made of. And looking at... so... I hit a thing. Fuck, I lost my train of thought. Because I hit that thing.
It's cell. It's
Cells.
a room.
Cells
It's a
in a
room. It's a room.
Yeah,
Cells in a room.
Cells in a room. It's the smallest, they figured out it's the smallest unit of life is cells, right? Talking about like fundamental units of things last time. The smallest unit of life is cells. And cell is the smallest thing we consider living because it does all those things that we mentioned before. It reproduces, it metabolizes, it does its like everything. Grows, reproduces. But the cell isn't made up of anything that's living. It's all... it's made up of what's called in chemistry organic compounds, which are just a jargon way to say particular molecules that show up in life. That's what carbon-based, right? We say we're carbon-based life. We're made up of organic molecules, and the base of organic molecules is carbon, right? So cells are made up of these things that are fundamentally not living. They're just chemical. They're just doing their thing. They're not living. But they make a living thing. They make a machine that's alive, this cell. These cells, pretty much their entire life goal is being just a protein factory. They're just making proteins, right? Like the cells in your head are making hair proteins, right? There are cells that make like enzymes that break down, enzymes are protein, like stuff in your stomach and your gut that break down food and things like that. So you're making stuff. Saliva is whatever. Anyway,
Some people think
Saliva
I'm
is par for the course.
it's water with proteins, enzymes in it, right? I was going somewhere with all that.
We make it a protein.
So made up of non-living things, right? So then it makes like how come the cell is now alive? Because it just like hits all those metrics. You know what I mean? Like why all of a sudden like at this level now we have life. So it's hard to distinguish between life and non-life, right? Everything is made up of the same stuff, whether you're living or not living. You know, there's like nothing fundamentally special about being alive. Like you're made up of elements and molecules, but everything is made up of that. Mm-hmm. Like everything is made up of atoms, and the atoms are just protons, neutrons, and electrons arranged in interesting ways. Like just those three things put together differently. You know what I mean? Like talking at different scales, like gets everything gets fuzzy. Everything that we think that we just understand.
Is this eventually alive? We go deep enough?
That chair?
Yeah.
The stuff the chair's made out of is the same stuff that we're made out of.
So it is.
Protons, neutrons, electrons. So is the chair alive? Or is anything alive? Like what is it to mean to be alive?
Is nothing alive?
Is nothing alive?
Is nothing alive?
So now our definition of everything, like life and death and growth and change and everything is weird. You know what I mean? If we can't fundamentally define life, then how could we know what non-life is?
We suck, man.
No, like it's not that we suck though. Like it's questions that we have to answer. You know? And I guess this is more like philosophy than science, because how do you measure life? Like what it means to be alive? Is that a science question, or is that a question for beyond science? Can we use evidence to determine what life is? You know? Fucking, where were we? What were we talking about?
Cells. The microscope.
The microscope.
The microscope.
Looking at some shit.
Whoever his name was.
All right, whether something's
Already
living or
forgot.
not
This is
living.
your job, man.
Whether something's living or not living. Hold on. No, we're good. We're good.
Paper.
Fucking shit.
Shit.
Listen,
All right.
we're hook microscope.
Microscope.
Mic.
We did all that. Okay, so whether something's alive or not alive, right?
Made of non-living
All right.
pieces.
I have an idea.
Carbs, proteins, lipids.
We did those are organic molecules. We're good. I'm good. I'm back on track.
Back in track.
So we could all agree that we're all experience something that we could all agree that's called life, right?
Yeah.
Let's assume life exists right now. If we assume life exists, then where did it come from? How did it start? You know?
Yeah.
What happened in the universe to make life? Or what happened on Earth to make life? What do you think? You have any ideas? I'm asking you.
You from TMNT2?
It was the ooze. Yeah.
Chemical reaction.
Mm-hmm.
I heard that space rocks hit us and they were covered in alien jizz.
I thought it was God.
Was it a god?
No, dude.
I think it was God.
You know what's weird?
Oh boy.
That's not weird.
No, religion is a topic that I want to get to, but not yet.
No.
I'm not ready yet.
Not
Not
even
there.
close.
We're not there yet. We're not there yet.
Aren't
I wanna
they
talk about it.
non-aligning magisterium?
Okay, well, anyway,
Never mind.
the alien jizz rocks. That is not far off to one of the theories of where life came from. Not
Is that
even
the
joking.
scientific term?
That's
John?
what it's called.
Dude, I swear to God, it's actually no. I swear to God, it's actually called this, and this is ridiculous. It's called panspermia, dude.
What?
I swear to God, look it up on the computer right now, dude.
You can't even say it.
Panspermia.
Panspermia.
P-A-N spermia.
Panspermia.
You know how to spell
Yes.
spermia. I know you
Alien
struggle
jizz.
with pan. Pan's a hard one for you, but spermia, all the way through. No trouble.
All right, listen,
Backwards even.
dude. This theory of where life came from actually says that Earth had no living things, and comets and asteroids had microbial life on it, and they brought it from somewhere else in the universe to Earth. That's where life came from on Earth.
Turn into dinosaurs.
So are we aliens?
We could be aliens. We might life. Our most common ancestors
Dude, we were once dinosaurs.
of everything living.
God.
Wait.
No, they're not here anymore.
We gotta talk about
We came from
evolution.
dinosaurs. Why are there still dinosaurs?
All right, we gotta talk about evolution, but it has to be after
We're doing
origin of life first.
Next episode. No. Okay.
Listen, no, this is important. All right, so yeah, it came from space rocks. That's panspermia. That's not the most accepted theory, though. That's not the most.
It's there. It's
Is
on
it
the
like-
table.
It's on
like
the table.
20%.
We're not 100% sure. The most accepted theory right now is called abiogenesis. I'm pretty sure it's pronounced that way. I've never actually heard it be pronounced. I've only read it, but it's abiogenesis or abio. No.
It's probably
When you break down the word, all right, I have to go on a tangent real quick. Science words. Listen, you'll be able to understand any science word if you just understand how they make these words in the first place, right? When you have a in front of something, it means not, right? What do you think bio means?
living?
Yeah, exactly.
Organic?
Not living. Not
Okay.
living. And what does genesis mean?
Beginning?
Yeah, right. Nothing was living in the beginning. That's why we make these super fancy words that like shut people out, but like it's just like we're just putting like Latin and Greek sometimes. Like we're just putting these things together to make words. So like every time you see octo, it means 8. You know, it's always, we're very particular about even how we break up these words. Like in chemistry, way off topic, but in chemistry, it's like carbon dioxide. The way you break it down, it's carbon and there's 2 oxygen, dioxide. You know, that's how we make these words. That's all it is. All right, so back to abiogenesis. In the 50s, I want to say 50s. Miller and Urey did an experiment. We're on where life comes from. I just had to remember that for a second.
Was it called the Miller-Urey experiment?
Yes, it was, in fact. Where'd you get that from?
I don't know, I guess. You said it was really easy to name this shit.
It is, dude. It's so easy to name this. Dude, I keep hitting that thing. They did this experiment where they simulated the conditions of early Earth. And when I say early Earth, I'm talking lava and fucking just like hell, you know, like fucking bad, like the atmosphere is not, like there's nothing, it's just shit. The whole Earth is like that. And
The Earth is shit.
it's just shit at this
The
point.
world is
so
shit.
they
Yeah,
recreated
no,
that atmosphere of early Earth in these fucking glass experimental tubes and beakers. Like, you know what I mean? In a closed system, they simulated the conditions of early Earth. The same thing in the atmosphere. What was expected to be in the atmosphere, like methane, like whatever, all that stuff. I don't know if even methane was in the atmosphere at that time, but whatever was in the atmosphere.
I think it was. I think it was methane.
So
Mostly methane for a little bit.
anyway, so they recreated it, and they did like light. They did sparks through the atmosphere, kind of like simulated lightning. They like really did their best to simulate these things, and they found that when they let this experiment run with the sparks going in the early atmosphere, organic compounds not spontaneously, right, energy, but like they were created. You know, they were created in the atmosphere, and we know that organic compounds aren't living. We talked about that before. They're not life, right? They make up life, though. They made the building blocks of life in the early atmosphere simulation thing, which is crazy, right?
Yeah.
So, because of that experimental evidence, though, that's what the evidence is pointing to. That this is the best theory we have right now for life, where it came from. Okay, so where are we at? What time are we at? Can I keep? Can I talk about evolution? How much time do I have?
You have plenty of time.
Okay.
You have 960 hours of available recording time.
Oh, dude.
What are you guys doing next week?
I was thinking we could just do this for the rest.
Just all for the rest of
Yeah,
the
just
things.
cut it here next.
For the rest of it.
Don't worry, you
Okay.
have 28 minutes. You have plenty of time.
Wait.
Awesome. Okay. So, fucking evolution, dude. Fucking evolution. This is so important. Okay.
Fucking.
Evolution is both. Okay. We got to talk about the difference between theory and law real quick in science. A law is something that we observe, like a pattern that we see, right?
Yeah.
Like, what's a good fucking law?
Gravity.
Gravity's a law, but that's
But it's a tricky one.
see, the way what I was going at is evolution's a law and a theory, but gravity is also a law and a theory. So it's Yeah, so it's like I'm trying to. I was thinking gravity too, though. You're right there with me, but I was trying not to go there.
Why not? Can you define a law?
Yeah,
what is a law as
fucking-
compared to what is the theory?
Like, I want to get like a really specific example, but I'm fried right now. For no. Hold on. All right. So anyway, a law is something that we observe, right? Like, fucking. Hot things get hot, like feeling heat and I don't know, boiling stuff, like seeing stuff. Like we measure, or how about this? Water boils at 100 degrees Celsius at sea level. Like that's like an observation repeated. It's not really like a law of it. There are law names. I just can't think of anything right now, dude. But
On the spot.
I'm killing myself right now. I'm so mad. I can't tell you how many laws I've learned in my whole life. I can't think of one right now. Anyway, so a law is something we observe. A theory would be how we best explain laws, what's going on with them. Like for boiling water, the theory would be like the atomic theory and thermodynamics and things like that, like our explanation of it, of what's going on. So a law is something that you see and observe in patterns, and theory is how we're best explaining those things. But evolution is both, because we observe evolution happening. We've observed not only looking in the past at fossils and how things change that way, but we could look at generations of bacteria and how these bacteria are evolving, because bacteria generations happen so quickly. They're just evolving right there in front of you. They're changing. You know what I mean?
Thanks,
Fruit
Darwin.
flies. Yeah. So evolution's happening. And dude, like we're doing all of biology right now.
No, do it.
I have so many ways I want to
Do
do
it.
this. Okay.
Should have rolled.
Summarize this really easy topic.
Oh yeah. There's the extra joint.
Proven.
Fucking okay. So, is everyone with me? Everyone's good?
Good, man.
We're good.
Show me your science.
Okay, so we've observed evolution happening, right? But we need to explain why evolution's happening. You know? So some theories of evolution. One of the first ones we came up with was from some guy named Lamarck. Was his name. And he came up with what we call Lamarckian evolution. Swear to God, dude.
That's not
Swear to
real.
God.
That's not a thing.
I do look it up. Lamarckian
I'm not.
evolution.
That's not a thing.
Dude, it's ridiculous how he named this stuff. Some guy, Thomas Brown, looked at, I think his first name was Thomas, but he was looking at some water pollen grains through a microscope.
Yeah.
Not water pollen, like pollen grains in water through a
You
microscope.
about to talk about brownie emotion?
Yeah, dude, totally. I won't get into what it is, but this guy Thomas Brown observed that shit, and it's called Brownian motion.
Well, history does the same shit. Otto von Bismarck has his own Bismarckian style politics that most people still don't understand.
Dude, that's how we
Segue
name shit.
into high history.
Whoa.
Potential
Entire
episode
period
things.
Pop,
named
pop,
after
pop.
Queen
Oh,
of
shit.
England.
High history.
Stay on track.
Yeah, I can't wait for that. Anyway,
Back to things.
fucking how the hell did we get there? Lamarckian evolution. Okay, Lamarck. He explained evolution that if you wanted something badly enough, you would adapt that trait. And the best way the best example he had for this that he said was giraffes. You can't put air quotes in audio, I guess. I keep doing that.
No, they'll figure it out.
We'll just drop it.
Just draw them in. Ooh, sorry. All right, so Lamarck, he used giraffes as an example, and they were like, he basically described, like, imagine you're just like a fucking little giraffe in the savannah. You there right now?
Yeah.
Wobbly legs and
Shut
shit.
your eyes
And
and
no,
imagine.
and the giraffes don't have the necks yet. They're just little weird
They're like
spotted.
pugs.
Yeah.
They're like, what?
They don't have their necks
like-
yet. You mean horses?
They're like
Is that what
pugs.
you're
No,
talking
Sure.
no, they don't have any necks. Just the face sticking out of shoulders.
All right. Yeah, right.
Dude, somebody needs to draw that. We need the
I got
wallet
you,
in
don't
here
worry.
in real time.
I got you. So you're in the savannah, and you see those nice looking leaves on the top of the tree. You're sitting there eating this shitty bush on the floor, and you look at the top of the tree and you're like, nah, I want those leaves up there. That looks prime. That's money up there. I gotta get up there. So the giraffe just starts fucking reaching for it, you know? And it just kept like it basically the way he described this. You keep reaching for this thing, and eventually the giraffes, like they adapted to get the trait of the long neck.
Yeah, I don't think that shit works.
No, it like I kind of described it biasedly, but yeah, we don't go with Lamarckian evolution anymore. But what's really interesting is recent stuff now is bringing back some ideas of Lamarckian evolution, but more at the cellular level, with like what's called. I don't understand. I just know the name of it. I don't really get what it is. I got to do research on it, but like it's called epigenetics, and it's all about how. It's like kind of like Lamarckian evolution, but I'll save that for another time when I know a little more about it. But we don't, we don't really go with Lamarckian evolution right now. We don't. That's not what we're doing. What we have right now is by Charles Darwin.
The man.
Oh, sorry. The man, the myth, the legend.
Big Chuck
old,
D.
Yeah, big old Chuck D. Charles.
Yeah.
I like that. I know exactly what I'm going to draw for that.
I want to get some form of like Beastie Boys ripoff. No.
No.
I don't know. I'll figure it out. But so Charles Darwin came up with the theory of natural selection. So Charles Darwin was someone who worked so fucking like he never chilled. He was just always doing shit. He went to the Galapagos Islands. I don't even know where they are. Where are the Galapagos? Galapagos?
Galapagos.
How do you even pronounce it? I don't
It's
even
Galaptarock.
Galaptarock.
Yeah.
Galapagos. He went there. And he observed some
Like definitely in the Pacific.
he observed some finches or whatever, dude, and fucking he came up with a theory of natural selection from observing these birds. The best example I have is, so imagine you're some finches, right? And you could eat worms, you could eat berries, you could eat a lot of different stuff. And if you had like a sharp beak, you'd be better eating the worms, you know what I mean? If you had like a scoopy beak, you're better eating the berries, stuff like that. But so in a population, let's say you have a sharp beak population eating some worms, right? There are a lot of berries around, but they're not efficient at eating the berries. They're eating the worms. I'm making this up on the spot, but I'm trying to explain it as best I can. And then a mutation happens, right? They have a baby, and this baby's a little weird. It's different, but it has a scoopy beak, right? Just has a scoopy beak now, and it's so fucking good at eating these berries, man. It just and it's like it totally lives. It's the fittest finch, and fit does like survival of the fittest, right? Fit doesn't mean like muscular, like ready to fucking go. It just means most likely to pass on their genes. I know I elbowed the thing. I'm sorry. Most likely to pass on the genes, right? Does that make sense? The fittest. So that scoopy beak finch is just eating up all the berries, and it survives really well and has babies, and some of those babies have scoopy beaks, you know? And eventually that adaptation just keeps getting passed on to the later generations with the scoopy beaks, and so that scoopy beak was naturally selected for. Does that make sense? It was that trait, based on the environment they were in and the shit they were eating and everything, that beak worked the best. So that trait got passed on to the later generations. That's really all natural selection is. That's what Darwin came up with. Chuck D. Chuck D, my boy Chuck D came up with that idea. And we have a lot of evidence for all that stuff. So, okay. We're going back to where life came. Whether it came from space or whether it came from the fucking atmosphere with the Miller-Urey experiment, life came from somewhere, right? Life started. And life just was like happening, you know, and it I lost my train of thought. It happened and it was evolving, right? It was always changing based on the environment it was in. It was always getting like selected for. So like these microbes, eventually they evolved to be multicellular, be like a clump of more than one cell working together, you know? Because they found like that working together with as cells was beneficial compared to not just being a lone cell, right? That was beneficial for them. So that trait got selected for, right? Being multicellular. And it's not that you don't want to think of this as being linear. I want to make that clear. It's not that you were single cell and then you were multi-cell and then you were. It's that it's branching off. Because there are still single-celled organisms around. They didn't go away. They didn't become us because like this is better. It's just we're evolving. We're adapting to a different niche. What is it? Niche or niche? Niche.
It's really
Niche?
either. It's like creek or
Niche.
crick. It's fine.
Right.
You could say without whichever.
Yeah, I heard the word pendulum the other day, but I heard it pronounced pendulum.
Pendulum.
And I really liked it. I really like pendulum.
I like
You like
pendulum.
pendulum
I
better
like
than
pendulum.
I like
pendulum?
pendulum better than pendulum. And I think it's, I don't know if it's Australian or British or something, but it's something.
It's probably British. They know
You think?
how to say that shit.
No, the British call it penduluminum.
But like, think about how it's spelled. Like, where's that G coming? What is that? Where's that coming from?
That's how we hit
Pendulum.
that D, dude. It's a pendulum, son.
It's called co-articulation.
Yeah.
Yes, our speech specialist here knows all about it. That's awesome. What the fuck were we talking about? They were evolving, right? These microbes. Okay, branching. What was the word I said that got there?
Pendulum.
It's not linear.
It's not linear.
Niche.
Niche or niche. Thank you. Sorry, I shouldn't clap, right?
Beat your bitch.
Oh, turn? This way? Okay. Our sound guy was yelling at me.
With his hand.
All right. So we're
Psych.
living, we're striving in our own niche compared to single-celled organisms. So it's not like it'd be linear became us, it branched, right? So multicellular branched off, right? And then fucking photosynthesis happened. You know what I mean? Like how whatever, like it's crazy to think that like these, like, where did these things come from, you know? There were these little, like, so plant cells have chloroplasts that do photosynthesis. And chloroplasts, and more importantly, mitochondria. Have you ever heard do you know what a mitochondria is? What is it? Say the
Couldn't
word.
tell you.
It's the factory. in our
Yes,
cells
well,
and
it's the
energy.
powerhouse, right? Remember learning that in, like, middle school?
Yeah, that's why I just called it a factory.
Yeah.
Because apparently that's how I was taught that shit.
Factory kind of works, I guess, like an energy factory.
Yeah.
But I like to think of it as like the cell being the factory, and the mitochondria is like the power source.
Whatever.
Not to like, but like I see what you're saying with the factory. Okay, so anyway, there was like, so mitochondria. I went from chloroplast mitochondria. Both of them, they lived on their own, right? They lived, and they have their own. Oh, dude, I didn't even talk about DNA yet, dude. DNA is huge. Fuck. Okay. All right. So anyway.
Dude, DNA is like a whole.
DNA is a whole fucking thing, and that's going to be awesome to talk about. We'll get there.
Episode 7.
No, this episode.
DNA.
How far are we in right now?
43 minutes.
We can talk about it. I can sneak it in. How long?
You gotta
can we make
start
this?
now, though.
Oh fuck! How long?
You
can
gotta
we-
finish.
All right, all right,
You gotta finish your train of thought.
all right. Anyway, so yeah, I keep going on. I keep going off different things. But anyway, so the mitochondria and the chloroplast, right? They have their own DNA. They're living. And the best explanation we have right now of why they're in our cells, the mitochondria, is that they came into our cells. They came into our cells, and they got incorporated into our cells. They gave up their life to power our cells. They still have their own DNA. There's mitochondrial DNA separate from your DNA. And we're gonna talk about DNA soon. But it's separate DNA. So like, you could think of it as they gave up their life to just get their DNA to keep going. You know? So is DNA life? Yeah.
This is weird.
Oh yeah, I gotta talk about that too.
Not
That's a
anymore.
fact. Yeah, so they're incorporated into our cells, right? So eventually, like, these cells became more complex, and then fucking skipping ahead, like, these now animals they have these new things in the ocean that eat other shit, you know? They eat that. They don't make the food themselves, like the photosynthesis, but they actually just go around eating shit. taking other people's energy. That's easier to do, right? So like that have branched off and that evolved, and eventually becoming like animals and things like that, right? Evolved, came out of the fucking ocean eventually, right? And just like that just happened over and over, branching off, and eventually like we're here and we're talking about it, you know? We're sitting here and we're talking about life becoming this thing right now. You know what I mean? Isn't that crazy? We evolved to be able to talk about evolution. So is that like selected for, I guess, you know? To be able to have these big thoughts? Yeah.
I mean, it's the next step of evolution. You evolve to survive. What do you do when you evolve past the point where survival is easy? What's next?
That's a good
Well,
point.
how do you get
So
to survival is easy? You gotta figure out talking.
It's a lot
You
of
gotta
shit
figure
you
out
gotta go
fucking.
through.
You gotta figure out a whole lot of stuff.
I think fucking came before talking.
Yo, definitely. Yo. Oh, definitely.
I think it did though. Like if you really think about it, like we had to be able to reproduce before we could even bother communicating, right?
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Leading to those awkward fucking talks in the morning where you're like, your name was Julie, right? Don't look at me like that.
So you're arguing that
Yes.
talking is making it worse. All right. Anyway, so all right. So yeah, you're right. We evolved here to be talking about this. Like, what does it mean to be alive? You know, what is it? So going back to just like exactly where we started. What does it mean to be alive after everything we talked about?
To have cells?
To have cells. That's a big one.
To
It's
I don't know.
it's weird, right?
You never really answered the question.
I
You
know.
just-
Listen, science is.
You gave us a bunch of reasons why everything is alive.
I think everything is alive.
Everything might be alive.
I'm pretty sure now.
I really believe 100% that science is about questions and wondering about these things to motivate you to go out and find the answer. I think it's more about the questions than it is about the answer. You know what I mean? And fucking, there was one more thing I was going to say. There was something I was waiting for. I was sitting on.
DNA?
We gotta save that for another time. I can't right now. That's a
wanna bring
whole
it up.
thing. But fucking no, I can get into it. I can do
No,
it.
no.
No, I can.
It's cold.
It's cold. Okay. Fucking. What was I gonna say?
Thinking about the questions of life.
Yes. Thinking about the questions.
Science
of
about
life.
questions, not answers.
Science about questions.
Let's
not
get to a
answers.
closing statement, huh?
Okay. What it means to be alive. You know, we talked about where it came from, what it does, how we observe it, how we explain it, but like I don't think that's what life is, you know? It's not that feeling you get when you like go outside and the sun's shining and you go to your car and you're driving to work and you have the music blasting, you know, like nothing that we talked about is that feeling, you know? Does that make sense? So I feel most alive when I'm thinking about these questions and trying to figure out how shit works at the most fundamental level as best as we can. Like you thinking about these different ideas, you know? That makes me feel alive in that sense. Good?
I like it.
All right.
I feel alive when I'm
DNA. DNA. DNA.
Yo.
DNA.
DNA.